HMAS Melbourne was a Town-class light cruiser operated by the Royal Australian Navy. The ship was laid down by Cammell Laird at Birkenhead in England in 1911, launched in 1912 and commissioned in 1913. At the start of World War I, Melbourne was involved in attempts to locate the German East Asia Squadron and participated in the capture of German colonies in the Pacific, before being assigned to the North America and West Indies stations. In 1916, the cruiser joined the Grand Fleet in the North Sea, where she remained for the remainder of the war. Melbourne spent late 1919 and early 1920 in reserve, then was flagship of the Royal Australian Navy from 1920 until 1928, except for a second period in reserve during 1924 and 1925. HMAS Melbourne paid off in the United Kingdom on 23 April 1928, and was scrapped in 1929. Design and construction. Melbourne was a Town-class light cruiser. The ship had a standard displacement of 5,400 tons, was 456 feet 10 3/8 inches long overall and 430 feet long between perpendiculars, had a beam of 49 feet 10 inches, a maximum draft of 19 feet 7 inches, and a mean draft of 15.75 feet. The propulsion machinery consisted of Yarrow boilers feeding Parsons steam turbines, which supplied 25,000 shaft horsepower to the ship's 4 propellers. Although only designed to reach 25 knots, Melbourne was capable of sailing at 25.7 knots. The ship's company consisted of 485 to 31 officers and 484 sailors. The cruiser's main armament consisted of 8 BL 6-inch MKC*50 caliber guns. This was supplemented by a single QF 3-inch anti-aircraft gun, 2 303-inch Maxim guns, and 2 21-inch torpedo tubes, a single ordnance QF 12-pounder 800-weight field gun, 4 QF 3-pounder Hotchkiss saluting guns were also carried. Armor plating consisted of side belts 3-inch thick amidships, tapering to 1.5-inch thick at the bow and stern, along with protective decking over the engineering and magazine spaces, and an armoured conning tower. The ship was laid down by Cammell Laird at Birkenhead in England on 4 April 1911. She was launched on 30 May 1912 by Mrs. F. Broad, daughter of Australian philanthropist Robert Barr Smith. Construction was completed on 18 January 1913, the same day Melbourne was commissioned into the RAN. She was the first cruiser launched for the RAN, and the first completed. The ship cost £405,000 to build. Operational history. On completion, Melbourne sailed from Portsmouth for Australia, arriving in Fremantle on 10 March 1913. Until August 1914, the cruiser was primarily involved in training cruisers and port visits around Australia. During August and September, the cruiser operated with other Australian warships in the Pacific as a counter to the German East Asia Squadron, and was involved in the capture of several German colonies. Melbourne returned to Sydney on 20 September, and on 1 November joined the escort of the convoy transporting the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps to Egypt. The cruiser left the convoy while in the Indian Ocean and headed for Gibraltar, where she was then instructed to head for the Azores in search of the German cruiser SMS Karlsruhe. By the time she reached the Azores on 12 December, Melbourne had been reassigned to Bermuda as part of the North America and West Indies station. While on the station, the cruiser patrolled the western Atlantic from Canada to Brazil. In August 19 1916, she sailed for Devonport in England, where she spent a month before joining the 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron of the British Grand Fleet, stationed at Scapa Flow. From January until June 1917, Melbourne was docked at Birkenhead for major repairs to her propulsion system. The cruiser was fitted with an aeroplane platform in November 1917. On the 1st of June 1918, Melbourne launched her aircraft after sighting German aircraft over Heligoland Bight, but the pilot lost his target in the clouds. At the surrender of the German High Seas Fleet, Melbourne was assigned to escort HMAS Nuremberg. The cruiser remained with the Grand Fleet until the 30th of November 1918. During the entire war, Melbourne was not involved in any sea battles. Initially, the cruiser was not awarded any battle honours, but a reorganization of the RAN honours system published in 2010 retroactively awarded the honours Rebelle 1914 and North Sea 1916-18 to the ship. Melbourne stayed in Portsmouth until the 7th of March 1919, then sailed for Sydney via Suez, Singapore, and Darwin. The ship was paid off into reserve on the 5th of August 1919 until the 14th of April 1920, when she was recommissioned. In 1922, the ship rescued personnel from the sailing vessel Helen B. Sterling, which had been disabled in the Tasman Sea by a gale. Also in 1922, the ship was assigned as flagship of the Australian Squadron. She was returned to reserve on the 29th of September 1924. Most of the 4 years in service had been spent in Australian waters, with cruises to New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. The cruiser was recommissioned on 8 October 1925 and left Sydney for England on 23 November. During 1926, the ship was assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet on exchange with the British cruiser HMS Delhi, sent to operate with the RAN. Melbourne returned in August 1926, and resumed duties as flagship. Fate. On 9 February 1928, Melbourne commenced her last voyage to England, where she arrived on 12 April. Melbourne was decommissioned for the final time on 23 April, with her ship's company assigned to the new heavy cruiser HMAS Australia. The ship was sold to the Alloa Shipbreaking Company on 8 December for £25,000. The cruiser was transported to Birkenhead, and was broken up over the course of 1929. Citations